So today we are going to be talking about the Enneagram, and this is something that, in my humble opinion, you are quite a whiz at. It's something that came into my life and made quite a huge difference. So can you tell us what is the Enneagram?
Yeah. So I've been working with the Enneagram for about 20 years, just for a bit of context. And I've used it for my personal growth and have also taught it in various settings over time in the last 10 years or so. So the Enneagram is ancient wisdom about what motivates people to do the things that they do. And it's an oral tradition that's been passed down centuries. So the exact origins are not clearly known, but we know that there's evidence of it dating back to, desert fathers and mothers. We're talking thousands of years, not tens, not hundreds, thousands of years, and has been used by spiritual teachers from many of the world's major spiritual traditions and religions. And it is uncannily accurate in discerning the internal motivations for external behaviors. So, one of the things that I like to say is that it does not focus on outer manifestation of behavior, like what you see on the outside. It's more interested in what caused it, what caused that behavior, that manifestation of behavior from the inside. So it's really quite accurate in discerning what that is going to look like for an individual. Um, and it also provides some interesting insights into the changes in behavior based on whether someone is in what they perceive to be a happy place or an unhappy place, and whether they feel secure in the world or whether they feel under pressure and stressed.
So I think there's a symbol that's associated with it, right?
Yes, there is. The Enneagram is like a sacred map of the soul. And if you're interested, you can look it up. Just Google Enneagram and it will come up anywhere. Ennea means nine, and gramma means drawn or written. So the Enneagram symbol is like it's a nine-pointed star where each point represents a way of seeing the world. And as you draw the lines that make up the Enneagram, it's also a circle that represents wholeness and eternity and unity. It's the law of one. There is no beginning and no end. There's a flow around it. There's also, as we draw the lines between Enneagrams, the Enneagram numbers and how they're connected, there's triangles that you see in it, which I like to think that it's very, for those who have a Christian faith base, is very Trinitarian, like the law of three. And so the nine numbers around the Enneagram, they represent how we are born complete with all nine. But one of those numbers will represent your primary desire and your basic fear, and reflects the coping mechanisms that you have adopted throughout your life in order to meet those basic desires and fears. Yeah.
Okay, so some listening to this might think, oh, is this another personality test? Is it a personality test?
I completely understand that question, and I always have to address that question. So the Enneagram is often misunderstood as simply a personality tool to describe the quirks and the traits of people's individuality, if you like. But the Enneagram actually goes much further than those caricatures. It is also not intended to label people. It illustrates the 9 ways that we get lost, actually, going to that basic desire, basic fear, but also the 9 ways that we can find our true selves. It exposes the 9 ways that we can lie to ourselves and by extension to other people
Mhm.
about who we think we are, and equally 9 ways that we can come clean about those illusions, and the 9 ways that we can come back to our true essence and who we were made to be. And so I was, when we find the courage to be honest with ourselves, then we are ready for the wisdom that the Enneagram has to offer us, because wisdom is not is not found in congratulating ourselves about the personality traits that
Mhm.
we like.
Mhm.
Wisdom comes from understanding those parts of ourselves and addressing those parts of ourselves that we don't like, and I'm pretty sure other people don't like very much either. So it's not a surface level personality test at all. It is a tool for self discovery.
That's exactly right. I've heard that a lot from people that do different tests, and it's like, oh, well, I'm this, this, and this, and this. And it's like, well, that's the start.
Yeah.
Where
And
do you
so a
go?
bit more about those tests, just real briefly, Emma, is or whenever I talk about or teach Enneagram, I always refer people to the RETI test. That's RHETI, and you can find that on the EnneagramInstitute.org. And I always tell people it is only a starting guidepost,
Mhm.
like a signpost in a pretty English field that says this village is 2 miles that way and that village is 3.5 miles in the other direction, right? It gives you a starting point. And there's various reasons why people will test and come out as something different from what they discover their truth to be later on. Don't worry about that, any of that. It's just a place to start.
Brilliant. So, how does identity development tend to happen then?
So, in our cultural environments, and in the way in which we live in our cultural realities, we sort out our, what I would call, God-given, intrinsic characteristics into those that are acceptable to society and those that have to be put away for some reason. And then we learn to equate acceptable with value. So society teaches us that our acceptability and thus our value is dependent on the answer to 3 questions. The first is, what do I have? The second is, what do I do? Think about that. Often the first question, particularly in male culture, that is asked by someone is, and what do you do? Meaning, what do you go to work to do every day, right?
Yeah.
And what do other people think about me? And yet the answers to these questions do not define who we are. And but the answers are the lies that we believe about ourselves. And most of them are actually given to us by other people, right? Because we're the one in an inner way asking that question and seeking the affirmation and the validation from other people. And then those answers lay claim to our very identity.
Yes, that is so true. We all think that we're wonderful people, and it's not always the truth.
Or on the other side, you think that you're a horrible person So I'm
Mm,
thinking particularly right now about what's the book? I can't bring it off the top of my head, but the one that talks about the value of being an introvert. Western society does not tend to value introversion, right? It values extroversion, putting yourself out there, right? That extroversion, I promise you, is 95% all mask and bravado. It's not about who you really are.
exactly. So I imagine the way that we find ourselves as adults has a lot of impact from childhood through to adulthood. So what would you say happens as you move from childhood to adulthood?
So, as children, let's look at the children first. We all need an appropriate amount of power and control, um, affection and esteem, and security and survival for healthy psychological grounding. Now, you might respond, what are you talking about? Children having power and control. They have no power and control. Well, yes, actually, they do. And they start to assert it at a very young age. So, for example, we both know that when we have little ones at home and they're sitting in that high chair and you're spoon feeding them, they will assert a degree of power and control by spitting out what you're spooning in. And at some point, they're going to grab that spoon from you and demand to try themselves, right? So it begins at a very, very early age. And in fact, babies will test the boundaries at the very earliest age by crying for what they need. And they learn whether that's effective or not.
Mhm.
And so, without adequate fulfillment of these needs, we would not actually survive infancy. We are entirely dependent on our caregivers to ensure our survival. And when we don't get those needs met, affection, esteem, and some security, and being fed, watered, sheltered, all of those things, there's a term for that, and it's called failure to thrive, right? We will die if we don't get these things. So, based upon our experience of our environment and the people around us, we will figure out what it takes to get those needs met. And then they become our coping mechanisms that we continue to use through life. And they weren't wrong. They were never wrong. They were necessary, right? So, as a child, I learned that the more I gave of myself, the more love, appreciation, validation I got in return. So what was about my mother or being the eldest child that influenced that? The truth is that lots of things, right? It may also have been part of my intrinsic nature too. But without judgment, I'm telling you that my childhood perception of my value was based around what I could give.
Mhm.
A giver is who I am. And then when we mature into that adulthood, we have a tendency to over identify with those coping mechanisms that we learned because they worked for us, right? And they become foundational in what we now call personality. So in adulthood, to just really like personalize it, I turned into a boundaryless giver who, believing that she was helping um, other people and giving, actually turned herself into a boundaryless individual, inserting herself uninvited into situations that were actually, to some degree, at least, and maybe a lot degree, none of my business. Um, yeah. And that was one of the things that the Enneagram helped me face down the reality of, because I can promise you, I would have denied it vehemently. What do you mean? You know,
Mhm.
I'm I'm inserting myself uninvited. I'm just trying to help. Oh, woe is me. After all I've done for you. And
Oh,
that realization that there's two sides to the same coin, and I needed to look at the other side that you never want to look at.
yeah.
Sobering, isn't it?
Oh, it's horrendous. So Yeah, in that case, some of it can be very like staring truth in the face, and it's truth you don't want to look at times, and some truth that you have to because things aren't working for you. So it must be really, really hard to look at this stuff, right?
Yes, yes, it is. And that's why you have to be, honestly, you have to get to a point where life is not working, basically, and you're willing to look at anything that might provide you for answers or with answers. It's like you get to a point and you start to detect patterns. You have to ask yourself, uh, is there a common denominator here? And for sure, you start out wanting to believe that the common denominator is anything and anybody else in your life. But if you're interested in personal growth, you have to realize that it's actually you, right? And so I can tell you about this journey in my life because I have done and continue to do and will always have to do the work of freeing myself from those personality elements. And that's why I can talk about it now. And so, interestingly, Emma, personality, the word personality is actually derived from the Latin word for mask,
Mhm.
right? And so, in navigating the world, we rely on these personalities or masks and become fixated on them because they once taught us, and sometimes still do, that these are the necessary steps towards survival and then happiness,
Mhm.
right? And yet, in truth, these masks we place on ourselves usually, they always do eventually cease to work for ourselves and for others. And they actually keep us developmentally and spiritually, I would say, stuck. So hear me here one more thing. Personality constructs are not all bad. They are necessary for survival, for navigating the world in which we live, and we can be thankful for that. And while we've needed these mechanisms to thrive, once have become enslaved to the patterns, we are our own personality's debtor, paying with our own lost identity. I realize that there's a lot there, but hopefully that's to some degree helpful.
So, can you give me a few examples of how your knowledge of the Enneagram has helped you in navigating your personal life?
Yeah. Um, so one of my favorite commentators on the Enneagram is, in fact, Suzanne Stabile, and you can find her anywhere, look her up. But one of the things she says is what we consider to become strengths in our 20s can easily become weaknesses in our 30s and 40s and beyond if we aren't willing to engage in deep, self-reflective inner work. You are not your personality. You are a spiritual being who has a personality.
Ooh.
And I lost myself in a world of codependency, married to an alcoholic husband. And I wanted to deny the reality of my own codependency, which is intrinsically wrapped up with this personality construct I had of being a giver. Is actually a bit, it becomes a savior complex in its worst. Like, yes, you have this alcohol problem and I can rescue you from it. I can save it. And rescuing people from their own behavior is the very definition of codependency, right? And so in my personal life, I had to come face to face with my own complicity in my alcoholic marriage and how I had done things to honestly perpetuate it. But when I was willing to look at the reality of that, then I was able to say, okay, what am I going to do? What am I going to change? Because I can't change anybody, far less my alcoholic husband. He has to want that for himself. So what I can control is what I can change about my own perspectives and behaviors. And
Mhm.
so that would be a very, very important personal example in my life.
Yeah. And it can be often useful in work as well, understanding the nine Enneagram types because you can spot people like, okay, that's your flavor, that's your
Yeah. Yeah. So the workplace is really interesting because um, it is not my goal. And in fact, I should never attempt to type someone. And I can't because the reality, to go back full circle to what we talked about in terms of um, outer manifestations of behavior may reveal something about inner motivations, but I cannot know what Emma's inner motivation is. Only she knows.
Mhm.
But in the workplace, I can see those manifestations of behavior. And I can ask myself, because I've worked with this for so long now, I kind of sense energies. I don't want to sound woo woo about that, but I can ask myself, what might be the trigger for what I'm seeing right now? And if I can think, oh, she or he is feeling insecure, he or she just wants to be perceived as a good person, or someone wants to be perceived as having a good foundation of knowledge about this topic, then I'm equipping myself to come alongside that individual and meet them where they are at in a very like just around a meeting table. So they won't know that that's happening, but I'll be able to include people and draw people into conversations by asking questions that will perhaps resonate them with them in a way that asking a question or a different question in a different way perhaps would not. And so I've used that a lot. People have said to me, Amanda, like you seem to have secret sauce about like inclusion. And I'm like, yeah, I do have a secret sauce. And honestly, just some Enneagram, some wisdom, and just leveraging what I know to help draw somebody else out is what it is.
Exactly right. Um, my experience with the Enneagram is, well, both personally and from a business point of view. Personally, well, I read the Suzanne Stabile book. What's it called? The Road Back to You. And it was the most horrifying read because I was reading each Enneagram type, and there I was, there my sisters were, there was the people I work with, the partner I was with at the time, and I was just like, this is life laid out in a book. It all makes sense now as to why things are
Right.
like this with this person and things are like that with that person. And then that helped me really understand what was going on with my interpersonal relationships with different people. And then, it helped me figure out how I could best reach those people, and I understand what their motivations were and what perhaps their blind spots were.
Yeah.
Um, and then with
And your own, right? And your own
oh,
blind
oh
spots.
yeah, like all of it. This is not all about everyone
Yeah.
else.
I
It helps
mean,
you with other
just
people, but yeah.
yeah, just an aside there, Emma. I tell people to that it's a good idea to read that book. And
Mhm.
actually, it's a really the road back to it's a really funny read. It's so easy. It will make you laugh and it will make you cry. But I often say to folks, when the one that you read that pisses you off the most is probably the one you are, the number you're at.
It's brilliant. From a business point of view as well, it has helped me kind of figure out, okay, this person's motivated by, they want to see all the data, they want to feel safe, they want to, all of this. And I like drastically change the way I approach different people with the same information so that it
Interesting.
lands or so it's more palatable for them. Like some people
Yeah.
just want it straight slapped on a plate. Some people need the kind of, and this is why it's, safe to do this and we can move forwards with this. And if it didn't work, we could go back and do this. And, even though I didn't need to say all of that, you do it anyway because you know it's going to land then and they're going to feel at home with things. Um, so it's an amazing tool for yourself, for understanding the people around you a bit better.
Mhm.
It was an absolute game changer for me, really. It really was.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's why, I know this podcast was a follow on, a kind of opportunistic follow on to our perspectives conversation that we had the other day.
Mhm.
So if there's one takeaway from this, Enneagram is about understanding that your way of seeing the world is only one of many. And
Mhm.
the Enneagram focuses on 9 ways of seeing the world.
Mhm.
And it's a model that um, helps you understand that um, perspectives are there and they need to be honored, or we will miss out on a lot of the relational dynamic between you and me.
Yeah. Variety is the spice of life, I think they say.
It is. Yeah, it is. It
Yeah.
is.
So, what we'll be doing in future is ripping apart the Enneagram and looking at the 9 numbers in more detail. Um, and just to help people see if they can find themselves, see themselves in.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll look at the strengths and the challenges that each number has. And yeah, hopefully you'll find it useful. So thanks for your amazing wisdom as always, Amanda. And I'll see you
Yeah.
next
Thank you,
time.
Emma. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.